man. Such a high honor to end the year with a decorated musician, somebody who really is able to sing for his supper, doing something that I'm not really sure how our society views anymore as a profession, but he is a gifted player, gifted organist. Jerry Zaslawski, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake.
You know, I did want to ask you, when you first started, touring, if you could talk about, sort of the compensation you received for the gig itself. And the reason I ask that is just because my peers, at 46 and younger, a lot of cats today, they don't even get paid for the gig anymore. You can sell some merch or, tip jar. But at one time in our country, you did get paid for the gig. Was that something that happened on your early tours?
Oh, sure. Not getting paid for playing a night of music is just unacceptable. And all that, exposure talk. Well, it's just jive, really.
Jive, man.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there. That's what, counting chickens before they're hatched, however you want to
That's right.
look at it. Yeah, it's not a worthwhile endeavor. Sure, we got paid. In fact, we chose our gigs, depending on how well the guy, you got to balance out. You got to balance out the triangle. The way I understood it, the music's got to be cool, the bread's got to be cool, and the hang's got to be cool. So 2 out of the 3 of the triangle would get me to the gig.
Dude, I love the triangle, man. That is the sickest.
It's literally, the blues saved my life. It was paying my rent. I was lucky enough to start playing with guys like Little Melvin Underwood, who was having a resurgence of his career, and he put out a great record, some real blues music delivered with authority. There were some other Hudson area musicians. Slam Allen had a wonderful band, and Roxy Perry. So I would work the blues circuit, while, working on the organ trio stuff. And then it was shortly after that, maybe a couple of years into my tenure over there with the blues guys, that I hooked up with a great drummer named Jim Payne.
Dude, I know. I did an interview with, what a badass drummer, dude.
Oh, Jim Payne, that's my guy.
Well, no, a lot of people don't realize he played on this sick Blue Magoo's record, Going Down South, with Pee Wee Ellis, dude. That dude is and he played with Edwin Birdsong, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, actually, this is bringing back stuff.
Good.
That's how I met Jim Payne now. Well, I met him playing with Little Melvin. He did a tour with Little Melvin. And,
wow.
Boy, there's a whole interview just about Little Melvin's saying what a deep cat he was. So, that's where we connected. And it was like one of those off nights where, me and Jim just did some duo organ drum stuff. And I showed him what I was really about. And so it was a natural progression. He had a lot of things going on there. He was writing books, and, after you spoke with him, you know, all that stuff. So he had things going on in his career, and I was lucky to hook up. And then we started writing music together, and we put out the first 2 of his solo records. And we dove into the jam band scene of the time, did all the Jazz Fest and the van touring,
wow.
alongside guitar player Bill Bigford. Just an animal.
Well, no, I want to ask you something. So when I want you to talk. This is really important because, the Chitlin circuit at one time existed, but Hudson Valley. I went to Jewish summer camp for 14 summers up in Elizaville, which is near Rhinebeck or Red Hook, which at the time was like a total ghetto, like the Rhinecliff Hotel. I'm just curious about, can you talk about the circuit? What was a blues circuit like in whatever years that was? It wasn't juke joints, was it?
No, it wasn't quite juke joints, but and there was Chitlin Circuit. It was still there.
Really?
Yeah, sure.
Wow.
And you know what? I didn't really hit the Chitlin Circuit until after working with Jim, and I moved on to there was a guitar player named Melvin Sparks.
Oh my! Are you? Dude, you're breaking my dude. 14 years ago, when I first started my show, the first cat I reached out to was Melvin, Pat Martino, and Melvin's like, "I'm ready to talk."
Get out of here! Wow.
And then he passed right away. I'm dude. Anyway, please talk about how you. Yeah. So, well, I don't want to jump too far ahead. When you were with Little, with
Little Melvin.
Little Melvin, yeah.
Well, he would string along these tours of these blues joints, and there was, I don't know if you want to call these blues joints the Chitlin Circuit per se. Maybe not, but there was definitely like a blues circuit.
I would love to know that circuit. First of all, is this like the 80s or what years are these?
This was the mid-90s, early to mid-90s.
Okay, so very fertile time, sort of a renaissance in some ways, the last real renaissance in some ways before.
It was a renaissance, if you remember, especially on my instrument.
Absolutely, man.
Somehow the Hammond organ, which you would see, on the side of the road in the 80s, now all of a sudden, had this resurgence. I think thanks to there was some definitely contributing factors like, the talent like Joey DeFrancesco, bands like Medeski, Martin, and Wood had a lot to do with the resurgence. Larry Golding, some of those early pioneers.
I was going to say Medeski, Martin. I mean, from my generation, those cats were also writing original music based around the organ too, which was fascinating.
Exactly. Yeah.
So so this blues circuit, live music existed, but it was just funny because you talk to cats in the 60s and 70s. I mean, cats would bring guns to the venue to make sure they get paid. But I mean, Little Melvin was able to. I mean, this was a commodified situation. The money wasn't funny, and you were getting paid as a professional cat.
Absolutely, yeah. And Melvin relied on a pool of, professional musicians that would go in and do the job, and of course, he had a young band. He liked having a young band. He didn't last too long, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And he got caught back into some of the
old habits.
Getting high.
Yeah.
Old habits. It's a good way of saying it. Thank you. Old habits. So,
old habits.
I was happy to be a part of it because, boy, when he had the real spirit of the music.
Exactly, man.
He was.
See, that's the thing. If you can capture the spirit and get paid, then you're doing everything right. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, because if you're getting the spirit down, then the hang's got to be pretty good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Was the circuit like Utica, Syracuse? What was the? I would love to know these kind of, because also in the past, like, I just remember talking to Steve Gadd and McDuff or McGriff would roll into Rochester back in the day, and they'd have a hearse attached to their van, carrying the beat. I'm just curious, like, I mean, how did?
Yeah. I came on the scene like a little bit after all that.
Yeah, a little bit.
I always wanted to play the Hammond organ on the gigs. Never liked playing, keyboards, synthesizers. For playing organ, for the kind of music we're talking about, right. Blues and jazz. So I would always try to find a rig that I could carry into the joint myself, like break it down to a couple of pieces. And I'll tell you why, there was early on, I would get these looks from musicians when they see me like carting in like a chop or a Hammond organ. They'd be like, "Oh no, not again!"
This dude pulled it off the side of the road, man.
everybody already had back problems,
Right.
Right. So that was the scene. As far as places like that, yeah, you're right. It was like upper New York, Philly. It was the tri-state area, Connecticut, and of course there are clubs scattered all throughout the country. Blues Alley. In Connecticut, it was Black Eyed Sally's.
Oh, I love this, dude.
There was in Teaneck, there was Mexican Blues.
Right.
B.B. King's in New York. So that's just like local that I could just off the top of my head. But those are the kind of clubs that Melvin was going for.
I would love you to talk to the audience, especially because, part of my love of music, I mean, all the music I love happened before I was born, which was, 78. And I mean, I still love live music today, but mainly recorded music. When you think about guys like Groove Holmes or Bill Doggett or, Earl Bostic or all these fucking cats, like the thing that's insane about jazz from a certain period of time that I know that you love and try to get to every time is that the blues was right alongside jazz. I mean, it was right there. The two genres were almost intermixed. And, I feel like there's a pretentious nature in, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush because I went out last night to see my younger brothers and they fucking killed it and they're just burning and they're great. So there's great chops in Tucson, incredible farm system, but there has a tendency, jazz has gotten away from the blues and it's become a little bit more classicalized in my mind. There's just more of a homogenization of sound, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about, when you're playing the B3 in a blues setting as opposed to a organ trio setting. Do you use less language in the blues setting, or you play more sparse, or can you talk a little bit about just the amount of language you use in a blues bag versus an organ trio soul jazz bag?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's just.
You can riff on that any way you want. I don't care. Yeah.
Let's just start with the premise that jazz comes from blues.
Yes.
Blues is the daddy of all American modern music. Everything from heavy metal to pop music.
I did, yeah.
Everything has the DNA, whether it's hidden and it's hard to see, it's still there. I mean, if you listen to especially early genres of rock and some of the heavier types of music, there's always blues based language in the soloing, pentatonic blues. So that's a good premise to start with. So blues is the source. So for me, you have to have that element in the music if you're going to play, blues, swing music that swings or funky, R&B, jazz, blues, all that fall in that category. So that has to be there, pretty much all the time. However you hide it. I mean, Bill Evans was a wonderful artist with a fantastic concept, touch and sound, reminiscent of, third stream and classical music,
Absolutely. I listened the whole way home yesterday to late 70s Bill Evans with Eddie Gomez and Marty Morell. And I mean, he had blues in that. The blues was there.
Yeah, that's my point. And yet there's blues everywhere.
Everywhere, dude.
Yeah. It's just, so, if you try to get away from the blues and you're trying to play, modern jazz or whatever kind of jazz, you're trying to get away from the blues, you're kind of going into some other kind of territory, I'm not making any judgments. Everybody's got their sound, but it would start to move away from my understanding of jazz.
Is it, and no judgment, but in your mind, is it more of you're moving into more of an intellectual exercise kind of thing? Or, because the blues to me is emotive, how bad, how was your day, up and down, but you're really channeling your own story
Yeah.
as opposed to
Yes.
some sort of intellectual Lego set or something, you know?
Right. The blues is necessary.
Yeah.
You know, it's necessary for you to express it. You know, in your solo, and if you're not feeling that, then you're onto some other kind of music. You know, I wouldn't per se call it jazz. The kind of stuff we're talking about, blues. Yeah, that's, there's lots of other kind of music out there. You know, but don't go around calling it jazz.
That's what I'm saying. And no. So I mean, when you the little Melvin gigs versus, is there a discernible difference in the amount of vocabulary you're using in a? I mean, obviously you're an accompanist with a singer versus organ trio stuff, but is there a discernible difference in the amount of language you're using in a blues, strictly blues gig versus a soul jazz gig?
I'll tell you this, Jake. It comes down to taste.
Yeah, I dig.
So, I've been on gigs, on straight up blues gigs where, I was able to play a little more jazz language, maybe a little more bebop in the cracks, for me and
in the cracks, man. I love it.
That would enjoy it.
Totally.
And it would always go over okay because it comes down to taste.
Yeah.
Obviously, you get somebody, and this, of course, all these scenarios have happened and keep happening. They'll come up through the bandstand on a blues gig with a nice blues artist, and they'll play some jazz bebop, some Coltrane inspired solo, which doesn't reference the song or the music, and the reaction from the audience is usually tepid.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's like two different.
That happens.
Did you? The other thing I was going to say is, did you ever cross paths with guys like Bernie Worrell? Because he was a wetlands cat when you were starting to cook the groove in the upstate New York or that Hudson Valley area. But I'm just trying to figure out, like, preceding you, and I'm talking not records, but like live organ playing before Jerry Z got cooking on the circuit. Who were some of the cats that were sort of guys that you went to dig on, even the late 80s? Because Mike Clark was a bebop hideaway in the 80s. I didn't even know that for a long time. He was playing bebop in New York. I mean, this stuff did exist. Not that,
yes.
and even though there's plenty. Yeah. So riff on. I mean, I would love to know some of the cats that, some of your elders that you would go and dig on, before you necessarily became, pro level.
Yeah, the good music never disappears. It may go underground.
Thank God. I love the way you're waxing poetic on this stuff, dude. I love it.
Well, there was a number of musicians that, as I was coming up in the late 80s, I would go hear Larry Goldings and his fantastic trio with Bill Stewart. Regularly, I was a fixture. I thought Larry was really doing it right. Continues doing it right.
That's unbelievable, dude. I cannot believe it stretches back that far. Where were they playing? The Vanguard and stuff, or where were they playing?
No, they were playing Smalls and there was the Sweet Augie's, New York. So there were a lot of clubs in Manhattan. There were a lot of clubs that you could just go out on any night of the week to about 3 or 4 of them, and expect to hear some great level music. I mean, you were in New York after all.
That's right.
So the scene now where there's just a handful of places, it's kind of sad. I'm waiting for the resurgence again.
Yeah, and that goes back to, like, without getting too analytical, just it revolves around a sociological thing where club owners and people aren't so obsessed with formula trip music and the bottom line, and they're willing to pay people to sing for their supper and pay them as professionals. To me, it's just it's a vexing problem because music is unquantifiable. Deep spiritual music is unquantifiable, and therefore a lot of bean counters say, well, if we can't quantify it, then it must not be worth anything. Or it's like, even Dizzy and Charlie Persip, they used to go around, people would say, you just play music. They're like, we're not playing, man. We're working our asses off. That's the problem, and then it's just this idea of supply and demand. You have these limited, and that's the thing that's so magical to me, to think that at one time, and you're blessed because of it, you were able to really go, and there were four clubs or 5 clubs any day of the week. You were able to go in and just have your mind melted by these cats,
Yeah, live. You know what? Music, more and more I'm convinced that really the only way to appreciate music is live.
Exactly. Exactly.
At the end of the day, with all the expenses and, stereo equipment we have, at the end of the day, it's just like 2-dimensional compared to going to hear live. To hear, to feel the thud, the thump of the bass drum, and you feel it, like a puff of air in your face. You're sitting close enough. There's nothing like it, It's like watching a roller coaster ride as opposed to being on one.
When you talk, now, can you talk about, I'd love to, do you have, what are the gigs that you, that are your steady gigs at this time? You were, if I remember correctly, you were overseas for a minute last time we talked, I think.
Mm-hmm. I've been lucky. I've been able to get all those 3 things I mentioned.
Yes, the triangle.
The triangle. I've been working with Mike Clark and the Headhunters for 15 years.
Wow.
They've had a number of different configurations, but I wind up doing. At first, I was doing all the touring, but recently I do about 5 or 6, 4 or 5 a year with those guys. They have a busy schedule. And Mike Clark is one of my favorite human beings.
Just an unbelievable human being, man.
Yeah, and he's on the business side, he's above reproach. So, and the music is I was obsessed with the music of the Headhunters since I was a kid. And I've been lucky to be involved with them. There were some tours we had where we did it as an organ-based group.
Wow.
We went out for 3 weeks. It was myself, Donald Harrison, Mike Clark, and Bill Summers. We went out toward Europe for 3 weeks.
Wait, and you're telling me, were you kicking pedals? There was no bass player.
No, I was doing it all. Yeah, we were playing the music of the Headhunters.
Oh my God!
Like I said, I was obsessed, and as a kid, I spent a lot of time separating the two. I would obsess over Paul Jackson bass lines, and I would spend hours putting Herbie's parts on top of that on the organ.
Oh my God!
So I did that. That's how I met Clark. We were on a gig together, and I called one of those Headhunter tunes for Rust, I think, and he goes, on the organ? And I'm like, yeah, let's rock. And we did.
Oh my God! Wait, do you remember what year? That is so sick, dude. He must have been like, man, I dig that.
For me, it was for those guys, they were like, oh yeah, that was cool. For me, it was the ultimate.
Yeah, no, I love that. The old school cats are like, yeah, that was cool, man. All right, let's move on. The next one. And you're like geeking out in the corner, dude. I love it.
Completely. They were like, oh, okay, organ quartet. All right, what's next? And me, I'm like, man, we just did the Headhunter music in an organ group.
Man, I'm sorry, man.
Done.
That's
I'm done.
I'm telling you, that's one of the best stories I've heard all year, man. That's unbelievable.
Oh, thank you. I'll shoot you a couple of videos there on YouTube.
I do want to talk about Melvin Sparks. I will say there was, Jerry, the one thing about recorded music from a certain period of time is that there was good leakage and they mic'd there was a good room sound, and so the spirit got into the music in a lot of recorded stuff. Okay, but now that everything's closed mic'd, especially the drum kit, it's very sterile. So I agree with you. Today, live is paramount. But Melvin Sparks, who I never saw, maybe saw him live once, maybe, but his records on Prestige were out of control. And Leon Spencer and all those cats who were playing organ. But can you just talk about Melvin, how big a heart he had and how much love he brought to the world? Because I don't ever want people to forget about that cat, man.
Yeah, he was a very important figure in soul jazz in our music. So out of Jim's group, we were doing Jazz Fest and those type of gigs on the jam band circuit.
Right.
And you know that Jim was tied in heavy with that scene. He produced the first, I think, couple of Medeski Martin and Wood records. So
I did not know that.
Oh man,
dude! I know. I mean, Payne he's such a humble assassin, dude. He's a very humble cat, man.
He is. Yeah. He teaches at Berkeley now.
Illuminating
young minds. So he knew all those guys and he knew the vibe, the scene. So it was natural for us to be on that, and that kept us busy. And at one point, I recorded 2 records with Jim and his band. And on the second record, he invited his buddy Mike Clark to come in and play. That's how I met Mike. He had a 2-drummer thing on the Jim Payne's record, organ record, right?
Wow.
So, but Melvin Sparks, yeah. So Melvin had heard about me by this time and asked to audition. So he came over to my house and you know, so I was young and I was, you know, full of it. And I was a big fan of the music. I was studying, you know, organ is my first instrument. I'm playing since I was 9. So, you know, I've been working on this music for a while, and he was the granddaddy of soul jazz, and he's been on virtually every important, you know, jazz recording, organ trio jazz recording or quartet. I mean, he was on Black Talk.
Charles Earland, yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
He had a stint with Lou Donaldson, recorded with him and his own compositions. So he was one of the godfathers of soul jazz, what later became acid jazz. And
that's right.
You know, one of the precursors to funk as we know it. Very few people, in my opinion, realize what kind of contribution that organ jazz, organ funk, soul jazz, however you point it, you know, what an impact it had, influence on funk as a genre.
Please go deeper on that immediately.
Yeah. You know.
You're talking about like Sly Stone and George P-Funk stuff, like from that?
Yeah. Stuff that came in the 70s.
Yes.
There were guys like Jack McDuff.
Oh, my God.
You know?
Yeah.
And Lou Donaldson was known for having these organ groups, and they would play some straight ahead. They would burn some bebop and play the music of that time. But there'd always be a few cuts on the record that had more of a laid back feel. In fact,
exactly, dude. Yep.
In fact, you know, funk, you know, as it came to be known as a style, as a genre rather, was just a style of playing. Like after a long gig of intense intellectual music, these jazz musicians would take pity on the audience and say, "Hey, let's play in a funky manner.
Loosen up naturally, you know? Yeah.
Exactly. Let's relax now and just have some fun, play in a funky manner, you know?" No one's going to try to burn the house down, so to speak. Reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah, I did. Right. Yeah, it's simple, but right in your face, like just burn and have a ball.
And Boogaloo.
Boogaloo.
Yeah, Boogaloo. Yeah, soul jazz, that kind of stuff. That's where it originated from. Before James Brown, before Sly Stone, that was what was happening in the clubs in the Chitlin circuit. And it was happening on an instrument, going back to the blues, an instrument that was made to play the blues. The Hammond organ, which they would move from the church service in the morning, to the club. You'd be hearing Hammond organ a lot in your life. You'd be hearing it in the morning, at church on Sunday, and then you'd be hearing it in the evening and being played in a not so different way with a kick and back beat.
I love that. No, it's true. Les McCann told me that. Yeah, that's exactly what he would have. It was coming. Joe Sample too. I mean, those cats. It would be Sunday. They'd play in church, and then they'd wheel that stuff right into the clubs.
Exactly, and so
there was a real spiritual. There was a gospel feel to it as well.
And it brought that to the music.
Right.
It brought that sound, not just the sound, but the phrasing. There is a way to play that Hammond organ, which is steep in the blues. It was bringing that to everything,
Wow.
Right? I mean, you'd hear that kind of playing in church.
It would have been, the one cat I wanted to ask you about, because it's kind of a misnomer. I used to kind of geek out about the B-3, but there's one record. I'm curious if you've ever come across it. Chester Thompson Powerhouse. It's with Ray Pounds, Rudolph Johnson, and Al Hall on Bone. But the cool thing is there's no bass player. And Chester was obviously, as you know, one of the few cats. It's kind of a misnomer. I thought for a long time everybody kicked pedals, but no, most people don't. They might use it for accent. Chester really did kick pedals, and on that album, the bass lines are out of control. And I just wanted you to talk about like a situation where that has called for you, maybe even the Headhunters gig. How do you use the bass pedals? Are you kicking pedals, or do you use?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow, man.
I insist on it. In fact,
Wow, dude. Wow.
When I was that last tour you mentioned before, I was in China.
Yeah.
With Oz Noise Trio.
Wow.
And there was no Hammond organ over there. They had to backline a Nord C2D dual manual clone wheel organ, and I insisted that they go hunt down some bass pedals because you gotta. And this, I know this Jimmy Smith felt the same way. If you're not playing with pedals or giving it the old college try anyway.
I love it, man. You're not doing it, right?
Yeah. Maybe you're not so great at the pedals yet.
Wow.
But, bring it to the gig. And I've been playing pedals since I started.
Jerry Z. Now I know why. Jerry Z. This is where the rubber meets the road, man. Can you talk about why is it so challenging? I don't even know what I'm really asking. I mean, the point is Jimmy Smith said, give it the old college try. But you're saying to me that backline instrument they gave you, without those bass pedals, you'd not be having a good time.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it wouldn't be a deal breaker because it wasn't an important show for Oz, but it was.
No, I mean you got paid. It was a good hang.
My spirit. Yeah, it would have been a big bummer, and I would have had to do some extra work to rework some of my playing to compensate for that. Because look, it seems like there's a mystery about bass pedals and organ players.
Beyond mystery, bro. It's a big mystery.
I'll dispel it right now.
All right.
Basically, you're talking about your left foot traversing, a big span, a 25-note bass pedal, system board,
Right.
So you only have your heel and the toe to work with. And the way the bass pedals work is they work on a plunger switch. Plunger switch. If you press it, it makes a sound. When you let go, the sound is gone. There's no decay. You might have a reverb on the organ if you're lucky. But basically, it's a plunger switch. When you're holding it down, it's on. When you take your foot off, it's off. Now, it's really difficult, almost impossible, to play legato with one foot, to play smoothly with one foot. Imagine you have to play let's say a low C and then jump to a fifth,
Right.
There's going to be that moment you lift your foot and the sound is gone, there's going to be like an interruption of sound. So in other words, if you're trying to walk the bass in your feet, you're not going to walk all day long. But if you could walk the bass in your feet by itself, it would sound like boom, 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 boom. It would sound really square and not really swing.
Yeah, right. Totally, not like much more sort of up and down as opposed to round,
It would be, the notes wouldn't be connected.
Right.
It would all be staccato and you don't have a groove there at that point,
Right.
Now, really up-tempo stuff, you can kind of get away with it, right? Like some of the church stomp stuff. But that's pretty much the rule. So what organ players have to do is they have to either double the left hand and the foot or find effective places to drop the foot in. Like, they call them bass bombs, on the organ. So while you might be able to play an entire piece of music with just the feet, it won't sound that great. It won't be desirable.
That's right.
It really won't be legato. So the best practice is to use both. I'm sure that Chester doubled some of his feet and with his hands at some points. But it's like look at it this way. It's like, how drummers switch up their grips?
Absolutely.
It's kind of like that. Like a little passage is coming that you're going to have notes that are close together. You might just let your foot do a measure,
Absolutely. I love this. This is a brilliant. So you don't always have to.
Yeah. And it's not like a test of it's good if you can play the pedals and not, peak. But it's not really a big test of musicality. You got to do it. That's all. Yeah.
I mean, as opposed
to... It's a combination of both. And like a good technique, there's times where my foot will just play by itself. And of course, if you're talking about ballads, on a piece like a ballad, where the bass is really slow, tempo is slow, you can just play bass pedals and then harmony. It's a beautiful sound. How's that, Jay? Does that do it?
I mean, I'm gonna have to go back and transcribe that, man. You nailed that. Like when you went on the organ-based Headhunters tour, were you were doing just that?
Yeah. And I had worked up some pretty sophisticated left foot, left hand maneuvers to try to simulate some of Paul Jackson's tense, like on Watermelon Man,
Oh my God.
Yeah, like I'd have my foot play the root and my left hand would play a tenth above that. So it'd be there was a lot of adjustment, but look, man, I told you I geeked out on it and I had the time of my life doing it.
It's the most beautiful thing. As we wrap up set one in a chilly New York space, beautiful balmy day here in Tucson. I just wanted you to talk about, what you are, most grateful for in your life right now, and also, sort of an area musically or personally that you need to push yourself out of your comfort zone in order to grow moving forward.
Well, I never lose sight of the fact that I'm grateful for the relationships I've been able to cultivate, you know, while having a blast playing this music. Some people have the good fortune of being born into the music, where they grow up hearing it, or they have a big brother that turns them on to the music. I had to find this stuff on my own, and some of the relationships I have now are with guys that I really admired when I was younger. And also, I was always seeking some kind of I wanted the real sound, the authentic touch. That's what I was hearing, and I wanted to cultivate that in my music. So I always sought musical experiences that would run parallel to how I was feeling about the music. And I was lucky to do that with Jim and Mike Clark and with Oz for a number of years. So I'm grateful for that. I've always gone for the three, you know?
I love. No, I mean, what is there? I mean, people say it in a sort of and I know it's true. But what are you still? You know, where do you want to grow as a musician? Where do you feel like you need to grow, if at all, or is it just this one long journey, the forever journey of music?
There's that. There's that for every one of us, I believe. But in the short term, I recorded a record just as the pandemic descended.
Yes.
And I'm trying to release it in the spring. I'm going to be trying to release it in the spring. It's a wonderful record. Osnoy produced it, played on it.
Wow.
Mike Clark's on it.
Wow.
I got Lenny White to play with Mike Clark on a couple of tracks.
Get out, double drum. Are you kidding me?
Those two legends. Oh my God.
I mean, dude, the greatest cats in the world, man.
And then my buddy Chad Leftwich Brown, who is just a phenomenal young musician.
Damn.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. Can't say enough about Chad. I took him on tour of Russia with me under my name, and he was just on fire.
I might have to you might have to hook me up with that cat. I got to talk to him, dude.
You should check out Chad. He's just a wonderful, wonderful musician and human being. Yeah.
That's so. Yeah. Well, let's do this. I mean, when you're thinking like March, April, you're going to try to move on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's do a set 2 at that time, and we'll do some promotion for it. Lord knows, I mean, there is no roadmap with musicians having to wear 8 hats and promote their own freaking records.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for doing this, Jake.
Yo, Jerry Z, man. Happy New Year. So good to hear you, man. Thank you for taking the time, man.
A sincere pleasure, man.
All right. Be cool, brother.
Talk to you in a bit.
Peace.
Bye.